Thank you. If you didn't meet me in the beginning, I'm Daniel Atkinson. I'm the manager of public programs here at the MCA and the lead programmer on this from the MCA side of things. I want to introduce our next person who will be doing another expanded practice session. This is independent curator, gallerist, and space shifter Ciera Alyse McKissick, who will share how she is. Yeah, come on. There you go. I appreciate that. Who's built platforms, connections, and partnerships that center the needs of artists and communities, expanding on the intersections of interdisciplinary art practices, journalism, and public engagement. Will illustrate how the various projects have helped shape the ways that audience interact with, view, and experience art in unconventional ways. And I'll say, like, one programmer from another. I'm super impressed with what we're about to see. So if you can please join me in welcoming to the stage Ciera Alyse McKissick.
Hello. Thank you so much for that wonderful and warm welcome. Thank you all so much for being here, and to Deem and the MCA for having me be a part of this symposium. I'm really excited. It's been a walk down memory lane, kind of preparing this presentation to talk about my work. Oftentimes you're so caught up in the midst of it that you don't have time to truly get ingrained in it and look a bit deeper. So I'm very excited to be able to talk about that today. So I was looking for the clicker. I don't think it's here anymore. So I'll just have them go through it. I can say next slide. But there's a couple of things that are on point when I go through the presentation. So I am really a person who is from the DIY community, do-it-yourself, artist-run, really ingrained in so many different things. And I feel like I wear a multitude of hats. Thank you. So I wear a multitude of hats. So I'm a curator, journalist, gallerist, programmer, art dealer, art handler, marketer, promoter, tech support, juror, grant writer, host, artist, and community member, along with a host of other things as well. And I feel like you learn in the moment that you add on more skill sets to those things as well too. But I just wanted to talk about that. I feel like a lot of artists really embody that interdisciplinary practice. But when I think about dignity, I'm really thinking about my matriarchs and where I came from. I was very fortunate to have grown up with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother all in one time and space, and being able to be surrounded by them. And I feel like they really instilled those types of ethos within me. So I would be remiss to not mention them. This here is a photo of my great-grandmother and my grandfather and some of their friends. I was making this art piece to kind of model after our home in Milwaukee, which is where I'm originally from. We had the house on 16th Street, and it's been in our family for generations upon generations as well, and so many different people within our family have touched this home and lived there. So this image here is of them hosting gatherings within the backyard. We had the first house on the block that had their first driveway, so we would often host gatherings and social events within that space also. And I feel like what my great-grandmother really embodied through how she brought people together just within that home and within that space has touched me and been able to live through me as a vessel also. She was the Grand Worthy Matron of the Eastern Star Masonic Temple, so she was the highest of the high, and I thought of her in that way as well too. Also, my grandmother on my dad's side of the family, Lois McKissick, everyone knew her and called her mother as well. She was the mother of the church. She also had 14 children. My father was the last of the 14 children. So really being able to think about that legacy that she instilled. She made cakes for the church and oftentimes was kind of the center of the community within that space. We helped her make those cakes and deliver those cakes and make the boxes as well too. And I feel like I learned a lot about process and practice within what she's been able to do. Here is my grandmother, Pat, Patricia Robinson, and she was just so jovial and jubilant. She taught me how to be independent, to travel solo, to go after your dreams as well. This is a picture of her after, I think she was 67 years old, and she wanted to go back to college to finish her degree, and she was the oldest one in her class, but I was so, so proud of her, and you can see how excited she was here to be able to do that feat for herself. She was a lifelong learner also. And then here is my mother, the flyest, the most high. She's really amazing, and I feel like she really taught me how to have a really strong, heightened sense of a work ethic. I feel like she always had a bee in her bonnet when she wasn't working. She was always doing some project around the house and knowing and doing it herself also. If we needed new cabinets, she took them down, repainted them, sanded them, and did everything herself also. And I feel like she's always supported me in my aspirations and my dreams. So thinking about all of them together and being able to grow up with them in my life has been super, super important to me. And like most communities, I feel like matriarchs are kind of the central force of building and holding space, and I feel like I embody that today. Thank you. Yes, give it up for my family. So I really think a lot about a constellation of things. This is kind of how my brain looks. I feel like I'm going poo poo like all over the place all of the time. But I feel like a lot of my practices really build upon one another or spread into each other as well. So as I mentioned in that first slide, all of the different things that I do, I kind of map them out here in a way to look at them and think about them. One thing that I can ascribe to this is me being a Gemini also. I feel like being a Gemini is really a constellation of organized chaos, conviction, and also curiosity as well, too. But it also is a testament to how I've been able to maneuver through space and work with so many various different types of community. And I actually looked up what the definition of a Gemini is also, and it says that they're versatile, comfortable being both introverts and extroverts, which I definitely am. They're quick to adapt to the energy of a room. They can be the life of the party or a complete wallflower, and they know how to bring dissimilar people together and make them get along also. And I feel like the last line of this is really a testament to that. So much of my work is about bringing various different people together, connecting them. I feel a little weird saying community now after the first conversation we had today, but really just thinking about how I'm able to create this constellation not only within myself, but within these various different spaces and people that I'm also encountering. I think about that a lot when I'm moving towards whatever curatorial project I'm thinking about, what type of event I'm throwing, and what kind of space I'm trying to create as well. So the first foray into kind of my work and my background, I was a writer, I still am, and a journalist. I grew up scribbling in notebooks all of the time, doing a lot of reading. Also, what was interesting too was my dad kept this magazine that I created back when I was a kid, and it was maybe like middle school, high school sometime, and I had people writing articles for me at that time. The magazine had quizzes like, are you the it chick? It was kind of modeled after like Teen Bop and those teen magazines that were going up. And I looked at the bylines and I had actual people writing for me, which shows me now what that through line was back then to today. But I'm learning more and more how journalism and my writing background influences my curatorial practice. And I really feel like it starts with this idea of questioning and inquisitiveness also. So when I was in college, I wrote for the school music magazine, and it was called Emmy. I also wrote for the school newspaper, and I really feel like being a journalist taught me how to meet people where they're at and talk to people and strangers that I didn't know as well, and be able to tell and amplify their stories. But what I was finding a growing frustration with during that time was, especially writing for the music magazine, was I was writing about people who were already famous, people who were already in the limelight, doing album reviews and things of that nature. But I was surrounded by so many artists and people who were making amazing work and wanted to be able to give them their first article or their first album review and be able to really let them shine in that way. So I was in my senior year after having finally declared my major as journalism. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker for a while, but really wanted to get practical and utilize my writing skills. So we had taken a couple of web design classes, and I was learning about logos and branding as well. And this was at like the rise of the internet. Like I was using Dreamweaver to make a website. This was before Squarespace and WordPress and all of those things, learning code. So I decided to tell my teacher, my professor at the time, that I wanted to create my own web-based magazine. And I designed the whole thing myself. I did 12 interviews with people, and I got an A on the project. So thoughtfully now, I'm still doing that same magazine and that same work from that time. And the magazine was called AMFM in the beginning. So AMFM initially stood for Art, Music, Fashion Magazine. And like I said, I was interviewing a ton of people and really trying to amplify their stories as well. But I was really thinking about how can I take this model of what a print magazine looks like and create something like that for the web and create long form kind of interviews and conversations within the space and on the page also. So I was very excited to be able to present this work to my professor, get that A, and I never thought that I would still be doing that work almost 15 years later. And the magazine has evolved into so much more since that time, and I'm super excited to kind of look at the evolution and how it's evolved over the last course of the few years. But because I've always asked a lot of questions, I feel like I answer questions with more questions also too. It's a way for me to dive a bit deeper into what I'm thinking, how my brain processes and moves things. And I feel like a lot of my most poignant projects or curatorial endeavors have really stemmed from a crux of a question also. And I feel like the first most important project that I did was based in Milwaukee just before I moved to Chicago. And what Milwaukee is known for is there's the lake, there's the beautiful museum. When people go and visit, people tend to only go to those sides of town. And I was really questioning what Milwaukee looks like from the outside looking in. Oftentimes, Milwaukee is also described as one of the most segregated cities in the United States also. And also, it's a place where there's a lot of violence as well, too. I know being in Chicago, there's always these kinds of stigmas that are put on a city and a place also. But I was asking if someone could put a face on the city of Milwaukee, what would that look like? And that was really stemmed from a project that a person in the city was doing. It was like a t-shirt brand called I Am Milwaukee Home. And at the time, they were photographing people from the city wearing these shirts and putting them online. It was becoming really popular very fast. And there was a Facebook kind of debate or conversation that was happening where someone that I knew who ran a gallery space who was kind of like a hothead, they were always like really trying to troll and like get at people. But the question that they were asking was really rooted in who was being shown in these advertisements and who was given the spotlight as well, especially in the city amidst multiple different diversities, but people weren't always saying that. So there was this hot debate on Facebook where the owner of the brand was going back and forth with my friend, and also other people from the city were getting involved, talking about how there were only white people in the images, other people weren't represented, what does Milwaukee look like, and whose home is it essentially? So I was diving in, I was looking at all the things. I didn't get involved, I don't like getting involved in internet debates like that, but I actually printed out the entire conversation, and I was just mulling over it and trying to figure out how I could create some sort of visual response or connecting response to bring these two people together to come to terms with what we were actually talking about. So the project that I came up with around this kind of debate was, I was really curious about what Milwaukee looks like from various different perspectives and people within a community. So I chose 25 photographers in the city. Some were friends, some were recommended to me by other people, and I gave them the kind of course to photograph 3 people that they knew and that they considered part of their own community within their neighborhood. And they also had to ask 3 people that were strangers on the street what their community looked like as well. And there was a series of questions that I would have them ask each individual and be able to speak to what are the things in Milwaukee that you engage with? What does your community look like? How do you feel as a person of a various different background interacting within this space? And it turned into this larger story and conversation and a really beautiful photographic project that I then presented at the gallery of the friend who was debating the woman. And I even got them to have a conversation about this whole thing. She was also involved in the project as well, too. Yeah. So it was this really beautiful kind of photographic array of various different people. So all of the photos were in black and white. We also included quotes from people from their conversations that they had, and the entire gallery was full of all of these various different people, which meant that in turn, all of these various people would come to the gallery and share space together within that gallery space. And we had community conversations as well, too. So as a part of the exhibition, not only did I have these photographs that were on display, I also asked people who were in attendance the same questions that I had the photographers pose to the people that they photographed. We had a map of Milwaukee where people could post a red dot where they lived and where they resided. And we also had these community conversations that broke down some of the barriers that we were talking about within that initial debate. So this is an image of people kind of unpacking everything that happened online in real time and real face-to-face conversations as well. And this was sort of my love letter to my city, and it was just before I moved to Chicago, so it was a nice way to kind of be able to give that back and be able to take something that turned into a really heated thing into something that had a bit more heart to it. So the next kind of foray into my work, I call myself a curator and I'm a founder, and I've really kind of struggled with this terminology. I feel like nowadays everyone's a curator. There's so many different kinds of ways of talking about that word. We have a curated menu, a curated playlist, all of these various different things. But what I found the actual definition of what a curator is to acquire, to care for, and develop a collection. And for me, that means to develop and care for people in turn of that, and also the artists that I work with. So after I did AMFM, the online publication, I was really curious about how do I get from behind the screen and get out into space and interacting with people also. So I was thinking about vibes, I was thinking about experiences, I was thinking about art, I was thinking about people and music, and how I can combine all of these various disparate things together and be able to truly create a multi-layered and multifaceted kind of experience as well. I really feel like the crux of the work itself is really rooted in space. So I was really interested in activating space, bringing together music with art, and hosting these shows where it wasn't just wine and cheese that you were coming to engage with. You were coming to engage with the people and directly what they were trying to get out there. So we hosted a lot of music shows. I often say we when it's really just me kind of doing this work also too. But hosting a lot of music shows where there was art involved, doing activations in unconventional spaces. This was in a mall in Milwaukee where I was able to decorate a window design and bring other artists on board with me in this kind of abandoned mall that was downtown as well. Also thinking through art exhibitions and creating solo opportunities for exchange. This was one of my first events in Chicago called Masquerade, where I collaborated with a fashion designer and clothing line, and also tons of models where I was making plaster molds of their faces in order to think about the masks that we wear and that we carry. And artists were then posed with the concept of creating their own mask with their own art, and then it was paired with the clothing as well, too. This also like to throw parties, like to have a good time as well. I think it's important to be able to be in space and to be free without there necessarily having to be a greater cause or a greater meaning behind it, just being able to let your hair down as well too. This event here was a program that I did in collaboration with a fashion designer who was making these amazing Letterman jackets. And I was curious about how we could engage with youth and go to various different high schools. So we went to 4 different high schools on various different sides of the city, and we did presentations on creative entrepreneurship and what that looked like also. And then the students were able to ask us about our work, and then they got to try out to be a part of a fashion show where they would wear these custom Letterman jackets. We partnered with the Ronald McDonald Foundation, and we had like a pep rally, and I transformed the gallery space into a gym. There were basketball hoops and everything around it as well too. This is more of just art activations. We had a popular series called the Jazz Series, which I was doing for a number of years before I got a physical space or location. before I got a physical space or location. And the idea of the jazz series was, it wasn't jazz in full effect. The tagline was, "This ain't your grandfather's jazz," because I was really curious about people who were using music, instrumental music, jazz influences, neo soul, and really pulling from that sort of jazz ancestry and bringing it into the contemporary sense. But I was also interested in getting people who were interested in jazz and older individuals to come and think that they were going to get a jazz experience, but stumble upon something new and something different also. So the kind of concept of this event was a pop-up space. So we went to various different spaces around Chicago, from gallery spaces to shops. We did one outdoors, mom and pop places, various different kinds of spaces that you wouldn't typically encounter in art or music exhibition. And I was very curious about people coming specifically to see the solo exhibition for the art show, and then people coming specifically for the music. And if you were coming for one or the other, you would stumble upon something else, and then they would intermingle. I was very kind of conscious about my curatorial efforts and what types of people I was bringing into the space, what backgrounds they came from, and how I could get them to mingle with one another also. This also is from an event called Old Black Magic. I was starting to think bigger and do larger than life ideas. This was an exhibition that had various different multimedia components to it. We had dances, we had dancers, we had music performances, there were film screenings, there were yoga and meditation sessions that were over the course of the entire exhibition. I was really interested in how to continue to reactivate a space so that you're getting various different audiences coming in for different things, and then some people moving along because they came to one and they wanted to come to another one and experience something new as well too. This was a really beautiful event. I was so excited to be able to bring the jazz series to the Stony Island Arts Bank and be able to do it within a space that was so austere and beautiful and surrounded by Glenn Langon's work, and be able to just have free reign over this space that I couldn't have seen myself in previously also. I remember being on the balcony, kind of this vantage point looking down with John Veal, who had recommended me for the Stony Island Arts Bank pop-up, and he said, "Look at this is what you've been able to build, and these people are here and they're mingling with one another because you did that." And yes, John is an amazing soul. Just want to give peace and reverence to him also. But like I said, space is really the crux of it, but it was also becoming like a pain in my side also, because it was constant proposals to various different spaces. I didn't have a lot of autonomy over how I could control the space, and also there was a lot of red tape sometimes. I was really curious about other people who were maybe having this issue as well, and I really wanted to create a space that other people could utilize to bring their ideas to fruition as well, have a space of my own, a space for us all. And that's when AMFM The Gallery was born. Oh, let me go back. So this is a video in the background of the opening event. It was kind of insane. It was this mini music festival. There were 20 artists featured in the exhibition. It was the coldest night of the year, and we had a line out of the door of people wanting to come and be a part of this. I had no idea how to run a gallery or how to run a space. Like I said before, I said we a lot, and it was really just me. And it was in this moment that I was like, yeah, I think I need a team at this point. I can't continue to do this on my own. But I was really thinking about this quote by Torkwase Dyson, what it means to teach myself in this small contained space how to think about monumental ideas. And I feel like that's exactly what I was able to do with my team that I built in that space. And we had a beautiful, beautiful run for 2 years in a Pilsen neighborhood. Even being able to have the community be a part of that and supporting it through a GoFundMe to be able to help get that space was so heartwarming and just showed how much this was needed. And 2016 was a really magical time in Chicago also. There was kind of the rise of these DIY spaces that were really doing really important and awesome work. There was the dojo, Party Noir was just starting, and everyone was kind of really rallying together and collaborating a lot in that sense. So it was just a really magical time for artists, and I long and have nostalgia for that time, and we've all grown and evolved in so many ways too. So within the space, it was about 900 square feet. I was able to do so much within that space. We had a small shop up front where makers, local designers could sell their wares, and we would present them to the public. They would get paid out every quarter, every month. And then we also had music shows where people could propose to host a concert or an exhibition within the space. And it was all at a very sliding scale fee. It was something that was accessible to people because I didn't want to create barriers to entry as well. I wanted people to be able to show up and to be able to do the thing that they do best also. We also had really great community partnerships and collaborations with our resident artists and also other organizations and folks that wanted to build within the space as well too. This event on the right is from a Brown and Proud Press. They were a local zine, a Latinx-based poetry collective that was doing an event called Cumbia and Stanzas within AMFM Gallery. It always turned into this beautiful dance party at the end of the night as well. We had resident artists who not only had desk space within the gallery to have a dedicated space to work, but they also received mentorship. We would meet monthly and have conversations about what they were thinking about within their practice, what ideas they were thinking through, what struggles they were having, and to be able to, at the end of their residency, was about a year long or however long they wanted it to be, honestly, to do some sort of event or culminating kind of program at the end. So this is an image of probably, I love to say Erin is a dear friend and one of our success stories also. Erin Leanne Mitchell is a wonderful artist and has started at AMFM because she was working in CPS and was really finding it hard to dedicate time to her practice and to make her art because she was so consumed by teaching and she wanted a space to call her own. So I invited her to have a residency at AMFM and she was in there like clockwork. And I know because I actually lived in the back of the space as well too for some period of time, and she would be there burning the midnight oil, just working on her things in between her classes that she was teaching at school. And from then she did a really wonderful exhibition within the space. She left Chicago, moved back to Birmingham, which is where she's from, and since then she's been collected by institutions and museums. She sold out a show in New York recently, and we still keep in touch regularly, and it's just been really wonderful to be a part of that stepping stone in that journey within her practice too. But thinking about how important it is for artists to be able to have space in order to let themselves dream and be free and bring those ideas, or even fail sometimes. I think that failure is also an important part of growth and practice as well too. We also didn't want to just do art-related things as well. We had a monthly event called Soul Sunday that was rooted in yoga, meditation, tarot, and really wanted to create a space for creatives to be able to come and be calm and be able to let go of the work. Finding that so many people are often like hamsters in a wheel, making constantly in production. It was a space where people could come and just be, essentially. But I was starting to think a lot about what does convening look like also within the work that I was doing. It's important to think about bringing people together, but what is the actual meat of what that means? How are we doing it? What kinds of people are involved in those conversations? And how are we evolving the definition of what convening means? I was also thinking about how can art be a tool for convening to talk about larger issues? So much of my work is really rooted in kind of social causes as well. I don't like to do art just for art's sake. I'm really drawn to artists that are thinking through something, a process, or something that is really speaking to something that's happening within their life or within their community also. And I feel like that's oftentimes been a vessel for the larger projects that I've done citywide also. This particular program took place in Detroit, and it was a part of the Allied Media Conference. We did this really wonderful event for 4 years called Black Independence Day. And it started because I love the Allied Media Conference. I miss it so much. I'm so sad that it's no longer around. But I was finding that they're bringing all these people from all over the world to Detroit, which is a really beautiful city with so much history, but often contested and people having preconceived notions about it. But you're bringing all these people into a space space. It falls over Juneteenth weekend. I didn't hear anything mentioned about Juneteenth at Allied Media Conference when I was there, or I was finding that people were coming to the conference but staying within the bubble of the conference and not going to the spaces around the city that make it so great. So I proposed to the organizers of the conference to host this event to really try to bring together the local community in Detroit and also the conference community as well, which is interesting because I'm not from Detroit either, but that was something that I saw and I wanted to respond to as well. So we did it in partnership with Party Noir as well for those 4 years, just before they stopped doing it before the pandemic. And it was a series of storytelling, art exhibition, DJ, dance sets, and all of those different kinds of things as well. And I was really adamant about what does cross-collaboration look like. I found who the artists in Detroit who were doing the work and making the things and were really a part of the connectivity of the city also, and thinking about how they can engage with Chicago artists that I'm bringing to the city also, or people who are participating in the conference. But I also was curious about who are the people who hold the truth of the city of Detroit also. So something that Peggy, who used to work with Grace Lee Boggs, actually told me was, you have people from the community directly here in this space, so that's a testament to the way that the curatorial process or vision has been. This is an image of Marsha Music, who was really, really adamant about making sure that we had people who were from Detroit and like a part of the community there. And she kind of not contested me in a way, but I felt like I had something to prove, one, because I'm not from there, but also she was, not gatekeeping, but checking for her city. She wanted to make sure that I was legit, I was authentic, and I was able to, over these 4 years, build this really beautiful community in Detroit and be able to have these conversations and have it be intergenerational as well, and really stay connected to the artists that were creating and making work there, while also creating a larger conversation around Black businesses, Black art spaces, and people that were doing amazing work in Detroit also. I think in our final year, just before the pandemic, we had created a directory that we were handing out to people at the conference of all of the spaces around Detroit that you could check out outside of the conference bubble as well too. So another project that I really, really loved is called Reservations. And if I wasn't a curator or working in the arts, I always told myself that I would love to be a chef and I would love to go to culinary school. So I kind of took that idea and ran with it with this dinner series that I created in conjunction with 6018 North's Justice Hotel. I was one of the curators where they did these different activations with Amanda Williams, where they were asking, what would you give in exchange for justice? And I was pondering over that question and thinking about a lot about food justice, environmental justice, and just what it means to even talk about that word. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? It may differ based upon your background or your experience also. And I was very interested in getting people from different walks of life together to break bread, because that's the way that you're able to break barriers and boundaries also. So kind of the makeup of this event itself was I was cooking 3-course meals, and in between each course, there would be a performance from a musician, a poet, a dancer, any type of artist, essentially. And it was a long table dinner, and I think the first one I felt like I was on a reality show, because they were building out this house to actually be a hotel, and the part of the programming were these events that we would host over the course of people's stay in the hotel. So this was a long table dinner where we had tickets, but if you didn't have funds or you couldn't pay, you didn't have to pay anything to be able to come. And then if you did have more access, then you could pay it forward and pay for additional tickets also. And I think the largest dinner that I cooked for was about 45 to 50 people. So with that kind of metrics of people coming from various different backgrounds, you get a whole host of people kind of sitting at this table together. There were kids and people from the neighborhood breaking bread with doctors or people from museums and things like that within the space. And it was just a really beautiful and kind of enriching conversation. People were talking to people that they wouldn't necessarily be sitting next to. So here's kind of an image of people who met for the first time there, people who you wouldn't necessarily think that you would have something in common with, with, but because you broke bread and because you had art as this tool to kind of start a conversation, it's become one of my most favorite series that I've done, and a way to really try to talk about the meat of issues also. This project, called Feast, is a music festival and also kind of mutual aid project that I did for a number of years in Chicago as well. It was really stemmed and rooted from work that I was doing on the West Side with SAIC and Home and Square. I was invited there to talk about my work, not in this sense, but just kind of walk around, see how we could collaborate or work together. And there was a really beautiful architectural structure outside, and they said, this is our new sculpture installation. We want people to come to it, but they haven't come. And I was like, well, have you invited them to come to the space? So that was like my first and initial question. And I was just talking to them in that way. And then eventually they invited me to come and activate the sculpture. But because I wasn't from the West Side, I wanted to give space and hold space for artists and practicers from the West Side to be able to show people where they came from and where they could potentially be. I took a step back in that sense. But because food is a way to kind of, like I said, break some of those barriers, I was really very interested in having food for these open mics that we were doing also. And this festival kind of came out of that because there was only one grocery store nearby us, and I was able to build a partnership with them where they would give us free foods, even if it was hot dogs and chips, to be able to give to people. But it got me thinking about how to utilize food to have conversations, but also in a space where food isn't readily available. How can I combat that? How can I talk about this issue also and raise awareness about it? I was also really thinking a lot about emerging musicians and artists and all the festivals that happen in Chicago. We've got Lollapalooza, we got Pitchfork, North Coast, all of these different things. But I felt like you had to be famous or almost famous as a Chicago artist in order to get a spot on one of those stages. So I was also thinking about artists who were kind of hungry for the limelight and how they could utilize their platforms and their voices to be able to talk about this larger issue of food deserts. So we partnered with Imperfect Produce. They gave us like 2,000 pounds of food. We were able to set up a farmer's market and give away all of the food for free as well, so people could just go shopping. We also had tons of musicians from Chicago performing on those stages, vendors and people who were doing mutual aid and food justice, and the city coming together every year for this one festival as well too. But I was also thinking about what it means to give people access to food, but not necessarily educate them on how to use it as well. So as the festival continued to grow over the course of the years that we were doing it, I was thinking about, well, we do this one time a year in the summer. What about in the winter when it's harder to have access to food or hot food? What are people going to do with just vegetables and things like that? So we started to host events throughout the year at various different park district spaces where we invite people to come and eat for free, make meals. I also had chefs come and do demos where they were able to educate people on what type of food it is, how you can cook it. So I remember one year we had a bunch of bok choy left over, and it was because nobody knew what bok choy was or how to make it or cook it. So we wanted to create that educational component within it also. So this project was definitely something that I am still thinking about and still revering in that way. But I also wanted to think about how I was showing up for that within my life and how can I put that into practice on the day-to-day as well too. So I started to cook meals and give them out just throughout the year as well too. And once 2020 happened, so many people were doing mutual aid. I wanted to find a way to uplift what they were already doing as well too. So shortly thereafter, the festival, the gallery got the horrible news that we were forced to close. It wasn't due to mismanagement. We were really successful doing all of the work and being able to have multiple people within the space and collaborating with so many different people. But I was unfortunately dealing with a lot of anti-Blackness within the neighborhood. I had gotten my window egged in the past. I had brick thrown through it, like complaints on things when we weren't even doing events. And it was at one point becoming kind of a very traumatic experience being within that space and kind of walking on eggshells also. I had quit my full-time job to pursue this and done it for 2 years. So I was thinking, like, what happens when your dreams come true and then you're forced to reconcile the loss of them also? And the loss for the community also was really, really, really devastating as well, because it had become this kind of community hub. So we hosted 200 events about within the space. We had resident artists. This was kind of what we put out to the public. It was very sudden. I came home to like a note on the door that we were getting evicted essentially, and I couldn't reason with the landlord, and unfortunately we had to close. So the outpouring of support from people was really, really meaningful and beautiful. I was like, AMFM is not dead. We're going to get another space. We're going to do it now. It's going to keep going. And I was very, very adamant about that decision during that time, and was thinking a lot about how it would grow and like build another space as well. I also felt like people thought that I would get another space very soon, shortly thereafter. And I thought that I would as well, but I was really asking questions of myself. What does starting over look like? What does the evolution of the work look like? I wanted another space. Did I need another space at that time? How can I heal from the trauma of that loss also? I was one of only a few Black queer women running spaces in Chicago. There weren't a ton during that time. Most of the time when there's venues or galleries, it's white males or white women, and I was in this space of not only doing a lot of labor, but doing a lot of labor that was tied to my identity as well. So instead of getting another space right away, I took the time to really go inward and think about what the evolution looks like, what growth and development do I need to do to show up for myself, but also show up for others. And I was really interested in what moving beyond events and happenings looked like, and also trying to rest, because I was severely burnt out. I was at the gallery all the time, doing events like 5 days in a row and things like that. And at one certain point, not even I wanted to be there anymore. So I was thinking about who and how do I want to serve, and really questioning what the next chapter or phase of the work looked like. So this is kind of, I feel like I'm still like in this little crux of like this moment right now. That was about 5 years ago, but I'm coming out on the other side. I'm very excited about the future and endeavors for future space building as well. But really thinking about research, programming, and promoting the work of others in a different capacity and what that looked like. And thinking about what drives the work and how I can put that into practice. I was also curious about who was also doing that work. What does it look like? Through what vessels are they doing it? And I really took a pause to work on that bit for a while. So much so that people thought that I moved because I wasn't out in the streets like I was before. But I was really just taking the time to really reflect and go inward. And it definitely was a process, and it took a lot of time also. But I was really curious about what sustainability in the arts space looked like, and how could I learn from various other people and what they were doing. I was kind of building the boat as I went along. Like I said, I didn't know how to run a gallery. I didn't know what I was doing at that point. I was just kind of doing it intuitively, really thinking about other models that I've seen. But I really wanted to work within a space where I can learn directly from nonprofits or institutions and be able to apply that to my work later. So I got a job again. I started working at a nonprofit called the Hyde Park Art Center, where I currently still work, and it was really, really transformed how I think about programming, how I engage with artists based upon the work that they were doing. It's an 85-year-old institution that started off as an artist-run space and has evolved into so much more, where they have educational component where you can take classes across ceramics, printmaking, photography, figure drawing, like the list goes on. Registration also opens on Tuesday for the next round of classes. But really thinking about how they're able to educate and cultivate an artist practice in a way that allows them the opportunity to try something new and to learn a new skill set also. I also was able to really utilize all the experience that I had working in my own artist-run space and building connections between people, and bring other people into the institution that may not have had access to it prior. So we hosted all kinds of concerts, performances, talks, and things, and I was able to really build this bridge between the institution itself and the community that we served on the South Side. We also had a really robust youth program. We have a teen program where we're supporting teens within the space. They get a lot of mentorship and growth in order to grow their ideas. There's an art exhibition every year, and this is from our Teen Arts Festival, which we put together. The teens kind of build the event in tandem with me as the public programs manager so that they can learn how to manage a budget, how to put together an event, map out a space. So thinking about spreading that knowledge and giving autonomy to people younger than me also was really, really important. And then being able to engage with artists so that they can share their practice with community members at large also. So we also host a number of programs and conversations where artists are able to show off their skill sets and invite other people in to play with them too. There's a really amazing residency program that artists from Chicago get year-long residency, a studio space, and they also engage with artists internationally to come and visit and do exchanges with artists here too. So being able to see all of the interworkings of how this space was interacting with artists and doing that work was really, really inspiring to me. I also saw development team and how people fundraise and build money, what the education team is doing. So really segmented practices, but coming together for this greater, larger good. I also worked at Oxbow School of Art in residency, which is a small kind of residency and school that is based in Saugatuck, Michigan, but they're connected to the School of the Art Institute. And I'm a really big lover of nature also. Love going for hikes, love kind of disappearing to unplug. That's the introvert side of me, being able to engage within those spaces. So I found it really profound that they were doing this work just 2 hours outside of Chicago. It was kind of a space for artists to have this oasis and come and make, and they called it art camp also. And it was a really enriching time for me as well too, to see how people are utilizing the landscape and nature to be able to increase their practice and grow in that space. They had gallery spaces where classes where people could take and learn a new skill in their print or ceramic studio. Food was also a large component within the work in the space as well too, where they would have meals 3 times a day where everyone would convene and sit down and learn from one another. On the flip side of things, there was a disconnect also between the makeup of people, especially being tied to a school like SAIC, where only certain people can afford to go to those spaces, and what does the demographic base look like? So as a person who used to go to class visits and try to convince people to come to Oxbow, or reading evaluations by the students about their experiences there, I was finding this kind of disparate kind of conversation between what students of color were saying versus their white counterparts as well. I was finding that they were having microaggressions or not feeling like they had a place or a space and feeling othered in that space. And I don't think that that's any detriment to Oxbow as an institution, but really thinking about how you're able to cultivate and build space for all kinds of people to be able to feel comfortable within that. So I proposed, after reading these evaluations, that we bring on thought partners to think through what it would look like to create a residency for artists of color specifically, and how to bring them to that space and be able to engage them in a different capacity. We had people who taught at Oxbow who were artists of color, who were arts administrators, come together to really unpack this idea and think about what that would look like. And even after I've left Oxbow, they're actually launching the residency in 2025, and I'm so excited to be a part of the jury process to see this thing that just was based off of reading and asking questions and looking at evaluations come to fruition also. So I'm really, really thrilled that that work and that legacy will be there also. But those stories essentially are really important to me because it really changed how I view exhibitions and curatorial work as well, being a programmer within a larger behemoth of a space. So this was my first kind of toe dip back into curatorial work. Relic was an exhibition that I did in 2022, I believe it was, and it was inspired by Alicia B. Wormsley's Pittsburgh murals that were saying there are Black people in the future, and there was so much controversy and censorship around that project, and I was really curious about why that was the case also, reading all of the think pieces and people feeling contested in just these simple words, but the fact that they meant so much more. So I was curious about if there are Black people in the future, which there are and there will be, what can we as Black people leave behind to inform them of their time here in this space? So the exhibition in and of itself was a relic, and I posed that question to the artists who participated in it to leave an artifact or use a piece of artwork to have a conversation around that. So we have some images of the space and the work. The artists who participated were really interrogating it from a spiritual essence. So Rhonda Wheatley had these beautiful sound vessels that also were rooted in tarot, and thinking about machines that she was creating and how to have conversations with the ancestors through the antennas that she had a part of them. Ephemeral and archival work that Janelle Ayana Miller did with her church fans that she collected as well. Historical, this gold large piece in the middle was by Shauna Pryor, who had copies of the Freedmen's Bureau's documents that people from the past who were getting property were signing and having their property be delineated after they passed away. So it was like from the 1800s, and it was just this really, really beautiful kind of conversation around what it looks like to have and to hold your property, but then again, it was ripped from them. So this conversation of it being taken and it being contested as well too. And then thinking about the body as well. So Abigail Lucien was thinking a lot about that within her work and her identity and ties to Haiti also. So it was just really beautiful kind of way of working with artists in a different capacity, but thinking programmatically that I've learned from all the work, how can I have these conversations in a larger way? How can I bring people within this space to embody this work? Each time a Black person came to the space, I would also take their picture as a way for them to feel seen. We had dance performances as a way for us to think about the body as a relic as well too, and also how to bring your own relics to the conversation. People were invited to kind of create this larger project around that as well too. And I'm currently in the throes of this final exhibition that I'm actually going to St. Louis to install next week, which also started with a question, and it's called Considering St. Louis. And I was in conversation with the luminary because I wanted to travel the relic show around to different spaces in the Midwest and engage with other artists. But they were in the midst of interim changes within their team, trying to re-envision what the institution would look like in the future. And even in our conversations, they were saying, we haven't shown a ton of work by St. Louis artists. And I was like, why? Why haven't you shown them before? This is on a street, a major street where artists reside and live and do work. You have one of the premier kind of smaller scale institutions within the space. So I posed that question, and it turned into an entire year-long research project where I was going to St. Louis for a curatorial residency to interview artists, because the question was, why not just ask them like what exactly they need and what they want? And it's a part of this larger conversation around what resources and infrastructures need to be in place in order for artists to thrive within their practices also, and how we look at the Midwest as an ecosystem or a microcosm of support also. So many people in the Midwest feel like you have to go to New York or you have to go to LA in order for your practices to thrive. And I was really curious about how can we keep artists here? What do we need to do in order for them to want to stay? But knowing that there's limitations to that work as well too. So on the flip side of interviewing artists, I was also interviewing arts administrators and people who run institutions about what the limitations of that work is. What sorts of resources are you offering? How are you engaging in outreach? How are people finding out about this information? So it turned into me interviewing about 30 artists within my time. Over every quarter, I would go for 2 weeks and do like 5 interviews a day and talk to people and ask them a series of questions. I was curious about people who were from St. Louis, people who had come there and were making work, and also if they had lived or experienced any time in other places as well too. And I've been really excited about the feedback that I've gotten. It's a part kind of research, quantitative, qualitative project as well. So as much as it is an exhibition, I'm also writing a report to kind of actualize all of my findings, and then now that I have everything that the artists were saying that they want, I'll then give it to the organizations and the institutions so that they can hear it directly from the horse's mouth to see and hear what artists want. So some of those questions that were asked were, Are you from St. Louis? Have you lived elsewhere? Have you received support for your practice? What does that look like? And then the final question to everyone was, do you think artists can thrive in St. Louis? And I got various varying different kind of responses as well too. And I got a lot of people telling me that they were more honest with me because I wasn't from St. Louis, because I wasn't ingrained in kind of the complicity between different communities when you're fighting for the same thing also. And I felt like that's really when I realized that my journalism practice was really, really rooted in my curatorial practice as well. So the show opens on May 31st. I'm so excited. Yeah, I've got like 15 artists in it, and we're working on a bunch of programming as well. But now I've been thinking about my role as a gallerist, a community member, and also an artist. Great perk of the Hyde Park Art Center is being able to take free classes. So I've been making ceramics and doing things and learning what it means to be vulnerable with your work also. I think I'm on the opposite side of things, and that's been a really hard but like patient experience to learn what it means to practice and to put work into something also. And then thinking about my role as a gallerist and how I want to move through space and engage with the artists that I'm working with while also helping us get support and funding through selling their work, connecting them to collectors also, and then what it means to truly be a community member also and connect people. So these are some of the most kind of recent things that I've done in thinking about how I'm engaging with various different spaces, venues, and entities around the city. I curate art for the Bronzeville Winery currently, where I'm bringing in every quarter Black artists to showcase their work within the restaurant space, which is a Black-owned restaurant, and being able to take the art outside of the white cube. I'm very, very interested in people encountering art in various different ways as well, too. I feel like the art world can be overly didactic sometimes, and I feel like that's oftentimes why I got into really trying to engage people with these questions, that they can find something that there's a through line or an entry point into it without it being too esoteric. I want someone like my grandmother, someone like my mother to be able to engage with the work and with the art and be able to break down some of those larger themes. And I feel like doing it outside of a gallery space is often a nice foray into that. People come for dinner, but then they're asking questions about the art. I get tons of conversation pointers from the servers who are like, yeah, people were really into this work, they didn't like this work, but they liked this one, if the other one was too abstract for them. But what kinds of conversations are being stemmed from those types of encounters as well? AMFM Live is a new talk show that I'm doing in collaboration with working from at the Hoxton Hotel, and it's kind of modeled after The Tonight Show, but Chicago style. So I'm like Jimmy Fallon, and I'm like having conversations with people. We're playing games and really talking to artists about what they're working on currently right now in this moment, and being able to have those conversational aspects to do it in front of a live audience, have them let their hair down and not let it just be about the work as well. And then being able to have access to spaces like art fairs and expos, Chicago, or the other art fair, these larger spaces that are full of commercial blue chip galleries. But what does it look like to come at that from a community arts kind of standpoint and be able to represent for emerging artists to be within that space also? So the last one was in April, and I showed artists who, 4 of them, it was their first time presenting work at Expo Chicago amongst hundreds of other gallery spaces, and I felt really proud to be able to talk about their work also. Amongst the people who came to our booth, they said that I talked to them more than some of the other people who were just behind the computer trying to make the sales, freaking out about sales and things like that. But I'm really invested in storytelling. So being able to bring them along for that journey and be at that space is really important to me as well, too. And then this is my latest project that I've just recently launched called Cam Contemporary. And it's my first toe dip back into having a gallery or a space again. I was really, really interested in residencies and curatorial fellowships, looking at places, but there aren't a ton for curators, unfortunately. A lot of them are for artists. And I was like, why not just make my own residency for myself? So I got a studio at Mana Contemporary, which is typically a space where artists have studios. And I was able to turn this micro space that's like 364 square feet into a micro gallery where I was really focused on showing solo exhibitions by artists, cultivating them through studio practice. So our first exhibition actually had an artist who, it was their first solo exhibition. They were working out of a home studio and wanted to make larger scale work, so I invited them to come into the space. I connected them with curators, arts administrators, and other artists to talk about their work and practice and where they envisioned their career going, if that was even something that they were thinking about, and really trying to help them along in their journey of what it means to write an artist statement, what it means to talk about your work, and really pushing some of those boundaries that they may not have seen themselves wanting to do. So the back space of it is a small studio space where they have all the tools that they need to be able to work, and then at the end of the residency, we turned it into an exhibition. I'm also very interested in conversations being had in this space to try to lessen the gap between curator, art institution person, and the public as well, to be able to meet people where they're at and have these really intentional conversations within this space too. But it's been really wonderful to kind of think about this as a pilot for what I hope for the next phase of the work to look like. I'm able to kind of just have free reign over what I want to do, how I envision the practice, and really play around a little bit and do what I want without very high stakes also. So it's been really exciting to be able to do that and bring other artists from other cities to engage with Chicago in that way. But essentially, this is just me talking about all the work and doing the work. It's been a wonderful journey kind of thinking through my practice and how I've been able to grow based upon these various different backgrounds that I picked up along the way. And I appreciate you all so much for engaging with me and learning about that and being a part of this journey as well, too. So thank you so much. Thanks.